Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring today's most pressing issues across the globe. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. As the economic downturn continues and inflation remains high, consumer spending patterns are undergoing a dramatic shift. Just a year after revenge spending dominated trends post-pandemic, frugal spending has now emerged as a new norm. Many consumers are now prioritizing budget-friendly products over premium ones, opting for bulk items and discounts. The popularity of secondhand goods has also been a sharp increase. Now, due to this, luxury purchases at department stores are on the decline, while low-cost convenience store meals are seeing a surge in demand. So what is driving this new consumption trend, and how could this impact our economy? For answers to this, we are joined by Shin Eun-kyong, Assistant Professor at Korea University's Department of Sociology. Welcome to the program, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Kim Mok-yeon, Professor at Seogang Business School. Great to have you, Professor Kim.
Good evening.
So let's start first with Professor Shin. Professor, what factors do you think have contributed to the rise in frugal living and thrifty spending here in South Korea? Do you think this trend is primarily driven by economic necessity, or has it evolved into a cultural shift in consumer values?
Definitely both. Economic pressures play a significant role in this trend, given expensive housings and a competitive job market. But beyond the necessity, frugality has evolved into a cultural statement. Influenced by a global sustainability movement and a critic of overconsumption, many Koreans, particularly younger generations, are rethinking the role of materialism in their lives. Underconsumption challenges the long dominant narrative of consumption as a marker of success or status. This trend highlights changing values where people seek to balance material needs with ethical consideration. Another important factor is that issue of sustainability. Environmental consciousness has become a dominant factor, shaping consumer values. For example, the fashion industry is widely recognized as one of the most polluting sectors, contributing significantly to carbon emissions or waste. Resale platforms provide a way for consumers to participate in a circular economy, expanding the life cycle of products. This aligns with a broader social shift toward sustainability, where consumers prioritize choices that minimize eco damage. Today, you buy secondhand items not because you're cheap, but because you care. Frugality is now often associated with responsibility and authenticity, aligning with environmental consciousness and a rejection of wastefulness of fast consumer culture.
Right, so it's not only about economic situations that influence this new type of spending. Then let me ask Professor Kim, how has the economic environment, particularly inflation and rising costs of living, evolved here in South Korea lately?
Well, while Professor Shin is talking about all the frugality, good meanings of frugality, I'm talking to economic environment. This sounds like shameful. Anyway, let me talk about three things in terms of economic environment. First, unemployment, and second, the inflation, and third, its impact on the spending of young people. Among South Korea's unemployed, those aged 25 to 29 account for 20.3%, the highest proportion among the 38 OECD member nations. This means 1 in 5 unemployed individuals in South Korea is a young adult in their late 20s. This trend indicates prolonged low economic growth and shrinking entry-level hiring by companies. Those who fail to get regular employment are left to compete with retirees in their 50s and 60s for non-regular positions. With regard to the inflation, data from Statistics Korea show that from 2021 to 2023, the inflation rate stood at 2.5%, 5.1%, and 3.6% respectively. Fortunately, in 2024, it was a bit eased to less than 2%. During the same time, the annual salary increase were only 2.5%, 0.9%, and 1.6% respectively. High inflation and low income growth caused low consumption among young people. According to NH Nonghyuk Bank, which analyzed the credit and debit card transaction data of its card customers from January 1st, 2022 to June 30 of 2024, the number of dining out transactions for young people in their 20s and 30s decreased by 9% in the first half of this year compared to the same period last year. Consumption convenience stores food increased by 20% instead. The number of transactions in department stores decreased by 3%. The consumption of high-priced coffee at places like Starbucks and Tucson Place also decreased by 13%, while purchase of imported cars decreased by 11%, purchase of domestic cars increased by 34%. As we can see from the data, due to the ongoing job market difficulties and rising prices, young people have the highest perceived economic pain index among all age groups. Additionally, rising interest in asset management among young people has also played a role in decreasing their consumption. Young people have invested in real estate like house and cryptocurrency rather than spend their money on commercial goods, even with borrowing money from financial institutions. According to the Financial Services Commission, there are over 4 million debtors who have loans from multiple financial companies. 31% of them, in numbers is 1.4 million, are 20 to 30 years old. Basically, they don't have any room for other spendings.
Professor Shin, do you think this trend is more of a temporary reaction to economic pressures, or is it becoming a part of a broader cultural shift in consumer identity?
It definitely reflects a broader cultural shift, not only in Korea, but on a global scale. Younger generations have embraced thrift shopping and upcycling as ways to define status and self-expression. Rather than signaling deprivation, these practices now embody values of creativity and responsibility. The underconsumption trend reflects a significant shift in how individuals and society respond to the pressures of consumer culture, environmental degradation, and economic inequality. Rooted in minimalism and sustainability, this trend highlights changing values where people seek to balance material needs with ethical and environmental consideration.
Right. And we hear that many of the younger generations, like our Professor Kim mentioned a while ago, millennials and Gen Z have adapted to this frugal spending trend really quickly. And some of them even participate in an online chat room, often called 거지방 here in Korean, that encourages, it's a chat room that encourages members to become more thrifty in their daily spending. Why are these younger generations more open or active, should I say, to this trend, Professor Shin?
They have grown up in the shadow of economic challenges such as global financial crisis, exponentially increased living cost, and stagnant wages. These experiences have made them highly conscious about their financial security, encouraging thriftiness as a survival strategy. Minimalism, a lifestyle movement emphasizing simplicity and intentional living, echoes really well with millennials and Gen Z. This cultural shift de-emphasized materialism, which was more prominent in previous generations. This Gen Z generation, MG generations, prioritize experience, emotional well-being, and environmental stewardship. For these generations, thriftiness and frugality can also serve as a new marker of social distinction.
Right. And lately, a part of this, the popularity of secondhand goods and resale platforms have been peaking. Professor, these kinds of platforms have been existing, available for decades. What's driving the rising demand lately?
I think most importantly, the increased concern about the environment. Historically, secondhand goods were often associated with necessity or financial hardship. Today, they're increasingly seen as fashionable, sustainable, and even savvy. Social media has played an important role in this transformation as influencers and trendsetters highlight this unique, vintage, eco-friendly aspect of pre-owned items. Secondhand consumption now signals ethical awareness and individuality, offering distinction in a world saturated with mass-produced goods.
Right, so there was a big change in perception, perhaps. Now, with this trend, Professor Kim, which kind of industries could largely be affected by this thrifty spending phenomenon, and what are potential implications of this shift?
Well, probably most companies which manufacture product, and particularly expensive goods, will be affected by the trend. And in addition to that, companies which produce, not eco-friendly product or services might be affected the most. The consumption trend among young people have changed from YOLO, everybody knows, right? You live only once. These, young people who pursue the YOLO trend, have spent a lot of money on their hobby and what they want to have. And then this trend changed to YOLO means you only need one. What is called frugal or scrimping consumption, right? They follow this YOLO. They are not hesitating to purchase second-hand good for simple life and do not want to, own many things. They prepare to use money for investment rather than just consuming. So companies which offer goods and product as a service may prevail. For example, there are lots of rental services, including cars, water purifiers, watches, bed, and home appliances. These companies are doing very well now. In the meantime, the trend does mean that young people are frugal in every aspect of their life. Young people, do not hesitate to spend on experiences such as sports or overseas travel. So this business will also be promising.
Right. So with this, you only need one kind of situation. Then how are companies which are directly affected by this coping with this situation?
Well, companies need to provide services that people do not want to own something or purchase a lot of things. They want to have those things as service when they need it and where they need it, and in the form they want to have it. So basically, this is what is called very personalized or hyper-personalized trend. And with this, a company need to provide those kind of services in a very eco-friendly way. Otherwise, they won't survive.
Right, so environment friendly is also a key in this situation. The latest trend is also seen in food consumption, especially among single households. Surprisingly, in 2020, the average number of meals eaten by a single person household was 2.2 meals per day. But this year, this has dropped to 1.8 meals. Professor Shin, what do you think are the social-cultural factors driving this shift?
The decrease in the average number of meals represent a shift in a personal autonomy and lifestyle preferences. I think it's rather than solely reflecting the broader trend of underconsumption. The 3 meals a day norm and deeply ingrained in many societies is increasingly being questioned. Long working hours leave less time for meal preparation or consumption. Eating fewer meals might also reflect a prioritization of convenience, with many options for quick snacks and a meal replacement instead of traditional meals. Individuals enjoy greater autonomy in defining their routines and making choices that suit their personal schedules and dietary needs. There is no definitive scientific requirement for 3 meals a day, and this flexibility encourages people to explore alternatives such as healthy snacking or nutritionally balanced meal replacement.
Right, so the shift in perception of a traditional meal has changed now. Now, what about the situation elsewhere? How do these eating patterns have compared to other countries around the world? Is this trend unique to South Korea, or are they also part of a broader global trend?
Worldwide, we are spending less and less time for meals. There's a clear global trend. Traditional meal routines are being replaced by flexible eating habits driven by urbanization, convenience, and evolving dietary preference. South Korea stands out for rapid adoption of this shift, fueled by urbanization, a thriving food delivery market. These represent a significant departure from the country's communal dining legacy, emphasizing autonomy and convenience. These behaviors highlight how global trends in urban living and individualism intersect with Korea's unique cultural and technological context, showcasing both a shared and very distinctive aspect of modern food consumption.
Right. And Professor Kim, how have the changes in this household structures, such as smaller families and more single-person households, influenced spending habits in Korea?
Well, we have to know that single person household becomes about over, 10 million in its numbers. That's huge, right? Let me, talk about how their behavior is changing. According to a report by KB Financial Group's Research Center, among 2,000 economically active men and women aged 25 to 29 living alone in the metropolitan area, 54.8% of respondents earn extra money through a second job. And this figure significantly grew from 42% in 2022. The average annual income of these people came to 37.8 million won. They spent about 41% of their monthly income on living expenses such as housing, food, leisure expenses, including entertainment and hobbies. On average, 12.6% was used to repay that, while 30.3% went into savings. And due to their financial constraint, they don't spend money to buy packaged goods, but single items when they need it. In many cases, they like to use services which require less initial investment. And they don't go to restaurants, rather they patronize convenience stores where they can find affordable food and beverages. In some, young people will spend their limited money on single packaged goods and services, but sometimes invest quite big money in something to enhance their experiences.
Right, so the direction of where they spend their money has changed a lot.
Right.
And given this increasing burden of housing costs and living expenses, which took a large portion of what you said, do you see frugal living becoming a more widespread trend across all income brackets, or is this still primarily limited to lower income groups?
Especially in Korea, right? Let's think about the economic situation in Korea now, before I answer the question. According to the Bank of Korea, household debt in Korea reached an all-time high in the second quarter of 2024 due to rising home prices and household loans. As of late June, the balance of household credit stood at $1.4 trillion, an increase of $1.1 billion from the end of the first quarter. Moreover, the household income has not been growing much in recent years compared to the price hike. I think the amount of household debt is quite big, and household income is not increasing. So this actually limit household spending, resulting in frugal living across all income brackets, not only low-income groups or younger people.
Right. Then now let me conclude our discussion. We're running out of time, but with our last question, Professor Kim, in what ways could this trend of frugal living affect the overall consumption patterns and long-term economic growth in Korea?
Well, a lot of people who think about the ESG trend and eco-friendly consumption and ethical consumption, this is a good trend, but in terms of economic growth, it's kind of bad, right? Frugal living, may affect not only consumption patterns, but also the whole industry practice and business models. People may not own much things, but use or share things together, which will lead to less production, but more sharing of existing assets. This trend will affect long-term economic growth negatively. This is a simple math. People buy less, that is, demand shrinks, which affect economic growth negatively. Due to the dwindling demand, companies produce less, which lead to less investment. These two factors, consumption and investment, are two factors of the core for the economic growth. So, absolutely, if this trend, keep going, the economy will face low growth in the long run.
Right, that's a negative impact on the economy, but maybe we're going to see more changes in business models by many companies in and abroad of South Korea. Now we'll have to leave our discussion right here. Many thanks to Professor Kim and Professor Shin for sharing your expertise tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure's mine.
Thank you for joining us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.